Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily companion for decoding current affairs the smart and strategic way for UPSC examination. It's June 13th, 2025 and today's edition features two high-impact analysis articles. Firstly, we examine the recent Air India disaster, understanding it through a disaster management and policy lens relevant for upcoming Men's 2025. Then we explore urbanization and transit solutions in India, focusing on sustainable mobility in an urban landscape. Next, our simplified articles, perfect for prelims 2026, cover central schemes, economic trends, global rankings, and key institutions like the IAEA. So let's get started. Hello guys, welcome back again to another episode of The Analyst, where we have today, in the very first article, a very tragic incident on accident that happened yesterday, that is June 12, 2025. Now, we all know of the incident as of now, that the Air India 171 flight, which was London bound from Ahmedabad, crashed just 30 seconds after takeoff. And this is a very tragic kind of an accident which has cast a dark spell on the entire nation, on the entire policy making aspirations, and also the scope of the aviation sector of our country. So that is why we have to talk about it. We have to mainly discuss this from the perspective of the UPSC examination, that is from the perspective of the mains syllabus, where we have the aspect of infrastructure and airports, and we have seen in the recent times how the government of India have been spending a lot of money for revitalizing the aviation sector of the country. Also, we need to look into the various aspects of disaster and disaster management, where in this particular aviation accident which took place is attributed to human induced disasters. So that is why we need to look into this article, where it is talking about the probability of accidents that generally associated with plane crashes. So according to the data which has been supplied by various airlines and also from government sources, we get to know that the majority of all the aviation accidents occur during the very short window between takeoff and landing, which are the beginning and the terminal phases of any aircraft flight. So herein, we need to look into the technical aspects firstly. When we talk about this Ahmedabad crash, firstly, let us look into what are the most risk-prone phases in aviation. Now, from the time when the flight is actually on the runway, that is, we board the flight prepares to take off, it actually is in the phase of taxiing. That is, the flight is actually coming from the airport to the runway. So that is the phase that we know as taxiing, and after that we have takeoff, then we have the initial climb, and then we have climb. Then finally the aircraft is on a cruising altitude, where generally the flight is on an autopilot mode. After that, when we actually talk about landing, then we gradually have descent, then we finally have an initial approach with the airport, with the air traffic control, that is the ATC, and then we have a final approach, and finally we landing. So that is where we have to look into the percentages, where we have the most probability of the fatal accidents. So if we combine all the beginning and the terminal phases, we find there is a 20% chance of aircraft accident in the first initial phases, followed with a 47% of this kind of accidents at the terminal stages. So this will be gradually be a very important data for us to study, and when we prepare about the aircraft safety in the aviation sector, this kind of data are extremely crucial. And why are we all discussing this matter at all? Because we have to understand firstly the nature of this disaster. We have so many kinds of disaster, right? Mainly under broadly two categories, that is the natural disasters and the man-made or human or anthropogenic disasters. So this is actually a kind of disaster which generally have taken place due to technical failure or maybe even human failure. And this generally took place in Ahmedabad, which is a densely populated area, which is actually near the Ahmedabad airport. And also this involved aircrafts which are modern transport systems. So we can actually term this as a combination of a man-made disaster, obviously a form of an urban disaster, and also resulting from a technological failure, technological disaster too. So this will serve as an excellent kind of a case study for our main answers to quote regarding the rising tendency of disasters in recent times. And this is a very sad incident which took place, which claimed the lives of more than 240 individuals, including the crew members and also the hostel, the medical hostel on which the aircraft actually flew into and crashed into. So this actually should be giving us time to reflect on what could have been, what could have not been, and what could we have done better. So to understand all of these aspects, let us firstly understand why the takeoff and the landing phases are the most vulnerable phases. So after only this, we will be looking into the possible causes of this recent aircraft accident. Firstly, let us understand why the takeoff and landing are actually riskier than when the aircraft is actually at a cruising altitude, or almost as an altitude more than 30,000 feet into the air. So firstly, when we have takeoff or when we land, the aircraft is very close to the ground. That means it maintains high proximity or closeness to the ground. And you obviously know that when the aircraft is just taking off or just landing, the probability of any untoward incident or any kind of technical failure will give the pilots very less time to react, because it is very close to the ground. When it is at a cruising altitude, the pilots can do various technical apparatus testing or various sandbox testing. But here we have to understand that with very less altitude, we have less buffer, we have less time. Also, we have less time for or less room for maneuvers. That means if we were to take a U-turn of the aircraft, or we have to make an emergency landing, that also increases the risk because we have less room. Because at a very low altitude, if we take a light turn to the left or right, that means that such a heavy aircraft like the Boeing 787 in this case, or various other heavy aircrafts, it takes a lot of time and it needs actually a lot of room for that. So even a small error can actually lead to a crash risk. Next, we have high workload for pilots in a country where the aviation sector is booming. We are at a time when the government is spending a lot on airports, a lot on infrastructure related to airports. Also, the private airlines are spending a lot of money on bringing in new aircraft fleets. We also have the new aircraft bill, which has recently become an act to undertake so many operations such as maintenance, repair, overhaul, and so many leasing operations and so on. So basically, the crux of the matter is that India is spending a lot on aviation sector. Now, we know that with high demand and obviously with high investments, we are actually putting the pressure on the aircraft staff. And what staff can be more important than the pilot? Because the pilots are actually the main spearheading factor of any aircraft. And here, during this takeoff and landing phases, the pilots who are already overburdened with too many flights scheduled for them, despite their high salaries, obviously that is one part of their job, but they are kind of overloaded with work, and generally during takeoffs and landing, they have to do so many things at once. That means they have to become a multitasker. They have to communicate with the air traffic control. They have to adjust speed and the flaps of the aircraft. They have to actually monitor the various engine powers and navigation factors. And here, the cognitive load or the load or the pressure that the brain of the pilot is actually taking is actually very, very high. So the cognitive load is too much on the pilots during this time. Also the added stress of various risk factors. So this is also maybe one of the main factors behind why it is a very risky kind of a phase. Next, obviously the weather always plays some foul or some factor. When it is on the cruising altitude, we have turbulence, and we have generally seen that the pilots can actually manage it quite well, because the pilots have enough room to actually go left or right or actually listen to the instructions sent by the ATC. But when it is in the takeoff and landing phase, in case of any storm, in cases of any weather related phenomena which can be localized even, that can cause a significant risk. In cases of even rain or fog that we have seen recently, also a few years back in Kerala, when due to heavy rainfall, the particular aircraft could not actually have brakes on the runway, due to which it actually went beyond the runway and it actually crashed to the airport walls. And that is also one of the reasons why sometimes planes also skid and skim. Next, obviously the mechanical failures are there, and it is to be noted that while a pilot is actually preparing for takeoff, or pilot and a captain is actually preparing for the takeoff, they actually conduct a wide range of testing, and the ground staff is also there to help them. But despite there can be some amount of mistakes or errors still imminent. And that is why some system faults, or even in some cases during takeoff and landing, minor incidents such as a bird hitting the engines, one of the engines or both of the engines, or even in the nose of the aircraft, that can be fatal. And that has led to so many aircraft disasters across the entire world. From my recommendation, I can actually suggest you a movie known as Sully. You can go and watch it. It will be giving you a real-time document as to what happens during such bird crashes, and also how the pilots actually manage the entire trajectory of the flight during such critical times. Next, we also have airspace congestion. And that is again a factor related to high workload for pilots, for the staff, for the airports, for the ATC, for entire stakeholders of the aviation industry. We have rising aircraft fleets, and that is why, at various airports, and generally this takes place at various major cities, where we have so many aircrafts scheduled, both from domestic and international flight carriers, that the air traffic control sometimes could not manage the proper takeoff or landing of that particular aircraft. And generally, that can raise the risk of miscommunication with the ATC. And at the end of the day, we have so many new obstacles near new airports, because the airports are generally situated in the urban areas, or say upcoming towns or cities, where we do not have proper planned structure nearing the airports. So that is why we have some kinds of obstacles such as electric towers or trees or buildings in and around airports, and that also cause various issues. And that is why, let us now come to the possible reasons. While we have to understand that regarding the Ahmedabad crash, we do not have official figures as of now, but the investigation is underway as of now, and obviously there are some possible factors. Firstly, it can be engine failure, and there are major aviation experts who are telling that almost around after 10 to 20 seconds of the aircraft, when it has actually taken into flight, maybe there was a bird or some other creatures with hit actually one of the engines of the flight. And that when you are actually taking off, right, the pilots do not have enough control if at all some bird is hitting the engines. And even only after 30 seconds after takeoff, you also do not have enough time to turn around and have an emergency landing. So that is one of the things which has been attributed to engine failures. Next, also, there are some reports which show that there have been excess amount of cargo because this was actually an international flight. Next, the experts also report that the pilots may have not followed the emergency protocols to have an emergency landing or having proper communication with the ATC. And finally, we can also have the evidence of system malfunction, because when we talk about the past incidents related to Boeing 787 and its performance over a period of time, we have so many instances where in 2013, in 2024, the Boeing 787 was involved in so many infamous crashes all around the world. And we have to keep in mind that this was the model which was introduced in 2011. And still after that, we have so many issues with the same. Also, when we look at the trust in Boeing And this is actually the trust that Boeing has in the US that has also come down across all flyers. I mean, all adult US flyers, some frequent flyers, or also business travelers. They have less trust on the Boeing 787 or Boeing as a company as a whole. And also, apart from this, we also saw that the last day actually saw the share prices of Boeing crashing to a very big extent. So that is why we have to now come to the lessons that we need to learn from this disaster. And firstly, we have to understand what are the institutional roles that the various authorities play in the country. Firstly, we have the Directorate General for Civil Aviation in the country, which is actually the, you can say it as a regulator of the entire civil aviation space in the country. And here, when it actually pertains to various regulations or even crash investigation, the DGCA actually plays a very important role. So here we need to actually empower the DGCA with more kind of rules and responsibilities to properly investigate the matter. Then we have the Airports Authority of India, who operates and maintains the airport firefighting standards. If at all due to any untoward incidents, may God forbid that, the airport firefighting standards needs to be enhanced. Also, the NDMA or the SDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority or the State Disaster Management Authority, needs to coordinate this as a national or a state level response. Also, the NDRF tries to provide on the spot support and rescue and evacuation operation. And at the end of the day, we also have the Ministry of Civil Aviation, which actually frames a policy for urban airport layouts and also the various safety audits that must be there at the airports or at the air traffic control centers. And this actually needs to be improved over a period of time. And also, when we talk about the aircraft crash investigations, this is highly pivotal because we have something which we know as the black box in every aircraft. And this is a black box which is located here in this particular space near the tail. And also we have some data acquisition unit in the cockpit which totally tries to capture the various data regarding the aircraft. And this here will be recording the data regarding the flights, regarding flaps, regarding rudder, regarding all the technical aspects. We also have the cockpit voice recorder. The conversation that the pilots have, those also will be recorded, and also the underwater locator beacon. So this is actually the various things that we have to keep in mind. And apart from this, we also need to have proper urban planning around the airports, because we have just seen how this plane crashed into the medical hostel, where even we have so many medical students who are alleged to have died. Next, we have to strengthen the airport fire services when we talk about response and also about mitigating the fires after the crash. Then we also have to enhance the mass casualty management, mainly by training the staff and having proper amount of aspects and funding at the airports themselves. Next, we also need to take care of the awareness and the preparedness form when we talk about training the aircraft staff and the airport personnel, and basically where we have to conduct more mock drills to prepare for such disasters in the future. And at the end of the day, we need to use drones, we need to use satellites, we need to use GPS, and we need to have more proper amount of strengthening kind of an efforts and coordinated approach to prevent such kind of incidents in the future. So this was actually all the things that I needed to talk about, and here we actually have a list of the deadliest accidents in the aviation history of India, which you can actually use as an introduction in a question that you can try writing right now. Because for mains we need to do a lot of answer writing. You try to write this answer on your own, and now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, in this editorial, we have a very interesting piece on India's urbanization and how we must be trying to deal with the new challenges regarding the transportation system within the urbanscapes all across the country. So here we have to discuss about the main policy imperative as to how India must be handling the public transits right now, because it will be defining the next urban India of the 2047, because by 2047 we are actually trying to become a Viksit Bharat or a developed country. So that is why let us discuss about this from the perspective of prelims, that is social development, and also urbanization from the perspective of GS1, and from the perspective of GS3 we have to discuss about the infrastructure at various cities, and mainly we have the transportation system as a whole. So here when we talk about this particular topic, let me firstly introduce you Indian cities and the need for better urban transit systems via some data that you can actually note down for your answers. Firstly, when we talk about Indian urbanization, it is likely to peak at 900 million Indians to be living in Indian cities by 2060. And this is attributed to around 60% of the population in 2060. So definitely we have a lot of rural to urban migration to be taken place between 2025 and 2060. So obviously if there are lots of people which are coming from the rural areas, they're generally coming for job opportunities or various other factors, for which they need to have proper connectivity between the urban areas. And also if at all they decide to reside in the cities themselves, they need to also get their own home, and from their homes they need to travel to their offices. Again, that is actually one of the reasons that for which we have to improve the urban transit system. So that is why we have to acknowledge the need firstly. Secondly, when we talk about the daily mobility, or the various facilities that we need, such as carpools, public buses, trains, metro railways, right? India needs around 2 lakh urban buses as of now, as of 2025, right? But right now we only have 35,000 buses. And here this is including the electric buses too. Now, when we talk about the current shortfall, only 37% of the urban Indians have access to, this public mobility facilities, and the rest of them are not, because maybe their homes are located far away from the metro stations, or the buses do not reach their, areas, or even, we do not have proper amount of roads, urban roads connecting to those particular areas too. So that is why we need to acknowledge this thing also, because when we look at the growth of the urban areas in the country, the existing tier 1 cities and the metros are expanding rapidly, and this is where the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities too are expanding over a period of time. So these uneven growth has actually created some of the issues. Firstly, we are right now over dependent on private vehicles, and too much of private vehicles lead to too much of traffic jam and pollution, and this is fueling climate change too. Next, metros are expensive to build, also expensive for some people to commute to. You can actually consider the case of the Delhi metro too. It is kind of expensive, mainly for the people who are not earning quite well, but they have to use it nevertheless, because Delhi metro is connecting wide swaths of the Delhi area. But we have to understand that even with such high ticket costs, sometimes the DMRC, or the main authority that is spearheading the metro construction in Delhi, that they are also not able to recover total costs. Next, when we talk about the electronic buses, so these electric buses are actually facing high costs because of high battery replacements, and also the subsidies from the government are not sometimes regular. And at the end of the day, we also have some issues pertaining to the last mile connectivity. And this is generally because the metro stations are far away from their homes or offices, and this is why, the government over a period of time did definitely took some initiatives. So some of the initiatives firstly are actually the PM e-bus Seva, where we are targeting to procure around 10,000 urban buses, and the status is still ongoing, but due to high costs, this is taking a lot of time. Next, we have the PM e-drive scheme, under which we are having the aspiration to have 14,000 new e-buses and also 1.1 lakh e-vehicles. Even we are trying to include electronic ambulances and so many other electric vehicles. But this is a newly launched scheme, and here the battery costs are very high, and it is also a very costly affair for the government, and the government also have been seeing a slow disbursal of the subsidies over a period of time. Next, also when we have the metro expansion, which major Indian cities are also ongoing as of now, where more than 20 cities are having the metro connectivity, but this is very slow. And also the low ridership, high costs are impeding the efforts too. Now compare the same thing with other countries. Countries such as Brazil, where 50% of the urban areas have public transit access. In China, 50% of the population again have the urban transit access, but this is only 37% in India. So why are these government initiatives still not enough according to the authors? Firstly, because metros, they take 10 to 15 years just to build. Take the Kolkata metro example, because we have to understand Kolkata is actually the first city in the country to have metros, but still as of now they are majorly operating 1 to 3 lines hardly. It has not expanded over a period of time, and it takes a lot of time to complete even one station. Next, when we talk about the electric buses, we have 82% loss over 70 years due to battery replacement costs, and this must be plugged in via more subsidies, and that is why maybe the private sector is not also too much enthusiastic to participate here. So there is a funding issue too. So obviously we have this kind of issues as of now. So that is where we have to now sum and summarize what are actually the main things which are missing in India's transit strategy. So this also can be your way forward in your answers in this particular case. Firstly, we are ignoring the old trams and the trolley buses which used to run in our country, in the British era. While, they are actually colonial vestiges, but still, when we compare them with the electric buses and even the metro, they are much more cheaper to actually operate, and actually they are much more greener than the e-buses too, because they are entirely electric. They run on electricity via overhead lines, as you can see here. This is an example of the Belgium's tram and trolley buses, and this is where we can actually try to replicate it. And here, when we talk about the weak last mile connectivity, mainly we have to understand the main weakness here, that the autos or the bikes via Rapido, Ola, Uber, which we can easily book right now, these are also not organized in a proper manner. And obviously we have the private companies, the ride hailing applications which offer us these services, but obviously we understand that due to surge fees, due to so many other factors, due to rain or weather issues, right, they hike the fees like anything. They actually overcharge us, and that is why we have to understand this is actually a very unorganized sector. The government must be trying to organize it better on a better platform, and obviously this is also very costly to maintain, and at the end of the day this is costly for the passengers like us. And next, when we talk about the over reliance on subsidies, mainly we are dependent on the subsidies given by the government. It can be the central government mainly, and also the state government in some cases. You mentioned in the comments which are the state governments which are taking good initiatives in this aspect. Now, when we talk about the government subsidies, the government have to continue paying for the subsidies over a period of time. And as you can see, as we have just discussed, this can run into 70 years of losses just due to battery replacement. And this is actually not sustainable over a period of time, because mainly the government is not giving money out of thin air. It is giving the taxpayers' money, right? And at the end of the day, maybe the government is also taking loans from the banks, which we have to pay back after 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years. That is putting the pressure on the future generations too. And obviously, when we have high cost, we do not have the private sector, because the private sector thinks that they have low return on investment. ROI is very low for them. And at the end of the day, we have the metro expansion, which also faces challenges due to low ridership, due to high fares sometimes. The fares also fluctuate according to the various cities. I already told that in India, in Delhi, and in some of the prime cities, the metro fares are actually quite expensive. And also, we have high costs to maintain. So this is why there are some of the, strategies that we have to address right now. So what is the best path forward? Firstly, when we actually try to adopt a way forward, we can actually learn a lot from the state government initiatives right now. This also you can quote in your answers. And the recent news that is coming from Kochi is that the Kerala government is actually trying to revive the light tram plan to actually decongest the roadways of Kochi, and also try to give proper affordable transit opportunities to the local people. Now, recently we have also seen how the West Bengal government has actually scrapped the tram services gradually over a period of time. But we have to remember that when we talk about trams, they have 45% profit over 70 years versus the electric buses, which run into minus 82% losses. So when we talk about profitability, we have better profitability when we talk about trams. But obviously, when we talk about trams in proper urban areas which are already established like Delhi, Mumbai and so on, we already have roads which have been constructed and adapted to the metros and the auto rickshaws or the buses. We do not have much space for the tram lines to be built, and maybe it can be a costly affair. So while we have made the mistakes of not fitting trams in Delhi or Mumbai, we can do the same with the new cities or the emerging cities or the emerging towns, as Kochi has decided to be doing so. As we can actually try to spread this to tier 1, tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities over a period of time. If at all we get the land for the same, we can actually have this on a mission mode. Next, when we talk about metro models or public transit models, we can operate it via the public-private partnership model, the PPP model, because it can share the costs and the risks between the private and the government sector. Next, we also have to now look into the financial viability and keeping the climate change aspirations in mind. Because we have some climate goals, we have the Panchamrit targets, we have to become net green by 2070, and that is where we need to keep proper adherence to those principles which are green in nature. That means we need to use more CNG, we need to run more hydrogen buses, we need to have more biofuel fitted public vehicles, private vehicles over a period of time to also keep environment into conditions. Next, we have to balance the subsidy limits. We have to calibrate the fiscal position of the state governments, of the central government, and we have to have a combination of PPP models, of maybe investment models from other countries to actually retrofit our urban cities. And at the end of the day, we can also learn a lot from Latin American models of having electric buses and bus rapid transit for actually transforming the entire bus systems in the entire cities. And this is actually possible via investments in technologies such as satellite technology, such as proper amount of mapping for the urban areas, and also using technology such as AI, machine learning to decongest the roads. We can also have dedicated lanes for the buses, and this can actually lead to less congestions too in the near future. So that is why we have to actually talk about the revolution that we must be bringing in the urban transit landscape of the country. So this is where again we have a question, like always, you please try to attempt this, because Mains 2025 will be containing various topics which are in the news right now. And the time period of these 2 months roughly that we have between right now till our mains, and all the news articles between this time will be extremely crucial for your mains, mark my words. So let us practice, right? And moving on to the simplified articles. Guys, the Ministry of Finance has released a circular which is kind of stipulating the monies that can be spent on various government schemes. So the main details are very important for our prelims and mains examination, mainly from a GS3 perspective, where we have government budgeting. So keep these principles in mind when we talk about government budgeting. We know that the government always runs on a tight budget. We always understand the fact that the government expenditure is more than the government receipt or the revenue, because we have to understand we are a welfare state, we have to spend a lot on welfare schemes, and that is why the governments also sometimes do not mind on delivering various welfare schemes. But there are so many welfare schemes which are not performing well, which are maybe subject to too much of corruption, or maybe there are so many loopholes in them. So that is why the government over a period of time has introduced something which we know as outcome-based budgeting. That means we have to actually look into what are the real outcomes of any government scheme. For example, if we are having a scheme known as PM Kusum, which is giving us the benefit of having solar powered water pumps in the rural areas that the farmers can use, because the farmers already used actually high amount of free electricity. and this free electricity is running into thousands of crores of rupees. So this is why we have to understand that the government needs to rationalize the expenditures. They need to look into what are the real objectives of the scheme and if at all we are achieving these objectives or not. So that is why the government is currently right now consolidating all the schemes and looking into the reports. For example, the Niti Aayog is looking into the centrally sponsored schemes and looking into what can be done more better, what can be streamed down and so on. And also third-party evaluation mainly done by some of the consultancy companies or even by some public companies and so on. So these are looking into the workings of the fully funded central schemes. So these central schemes are actually 100% funded by the central government. These are actually, some percent is given by the central government, some percentage is given by the state government. So this is why the government is looking into the operations. So the schemes which are fully, partially, funded by the central government will be continued beyond the financial year only if they are actually meeting some evaluation standards or meeting some quality standards. And here, those quality standards have been given a name of effectiveness test. Generally, the three changes which has been introduced. These three changes you have to keep in mind. Firstly, there has been a sunset date which has been introduced as of now. That means the schemes will be expiring up to a particular date. That means, if we have the Manrega scheme in force right now. So, for Manrega scheme to continue in the future, the scheme has to show that it is creating more jobs and then only it will be completed or say continued, otherwise it will be shut down. Next, we have a 5.5x funding cap which has been introduced. For example, say from 2021 to 2025 financial years, whatever the amount, for example, the amount was 100 rupees, right, per year on a particular scheme. Correct? Now the government in this Ministry of Finance circular is telling that, in the next 16th Finance Commission cycle, that is from the financial years of 2026 till 2031, if you want to continue that same scheme using this 100 rupees, you can only demand maximum till 5.5 times. That means if I have given 100 rupees to Manrega, if I want to continue this and I need more funds to continue this scheme, I can only get 550 crores as my future budget for this scheme. So you cannot get more than this, because according to various data, according to various calculations, the Finance Ministry has deemed it fit that this should be the limit. Next and final, that is that some of the schemes such as Manrega are demand based. That means this scheme is only given to the people if the people demand that they do not have jobs and they need some unskilled manual work such as repair, maintenance in the rural areas. And this is the generally 100 days work which is given to the rural individuals, mainly in non-seasonal times. So for example, even Manrega, if you are talking about, they will be needing approval for extra funds, because if only people need jobs, government should be approving extra money. If the government sees that in some villages the Manrega demand is not that much, the money or say the demand or say the scope of the scheme will not be introduced or say increased in that particular village. So this is actually a very welcome initiative by the government of the day, because it is trying to have some rules established. Firstly, it is, whenever we are trying to spend public money, the taxpayers' money, we have to be extremely cautious. This is also a topic in your GS4 ethics, which is actually the topic of spending public money. So we have to spend public money as if the money is of our own. The money is our own pocket money. The administrators, the government must be very cautiously trying to spend any money. Only then, we will be having effective schemes. Next, we need to ensure accountability. That means ministries cannot go on seeking funds again and again without any caps over a period of time. They must be trying to justify and plan accordingly. Thirdly, we need to have fiscal prudence, or we need to have proper rules and discipline standards when we are spending money, and we need to control our overspending, and at the end of the day we have to end those schemes which are not important or not relevant as of now, or which are not seeing demand as of now, right? So any kind of duplicate scheme can be merged with each other, or they can be totally be phased out, or the allocations for them can be reduced. So this is exactly what the government has also done in 2025-26 union budget, and that is why we have to now look at the benefits. Firstly, obviously it will be saving the taxpayers money, and it will be focusing on the real impact. The outcome based budgeting and also performance based budgeting is kind of related, where we are focusing on the real impact on ground, and at the end of the day we are trying to not spend too much of waste money. But there are some challenges too, right? Firstly, these schemes can lose funding. Some of the schemes which are very important, also according to various experts, they have seen that over a period of time the government is actually declining the allocations for the Manrega, which is a very important scheme. But and also, according to various economists and studies, mainly from the JNU, economic circles, they have found out that Manrega and also the National Food Security Act, both of them, have been very instrumental in reducing extreme poverty in the country. In the comments, you let me know, according to recent reports, what is the extreme poverty levels in the country as of now, which has declined drastically from 2001-2011 levels as of now. So they say that Manrega, which has been instrumental in reducing extreme poverty, this can impact the extreme poor too. And also the states may also kind of oppose this kind of cuts, mainly the states which belong to the other political parties apart from the centers, they can have issues with it. And at the end of the day, we can also have delays in approvals, and if we are having delays in approvals, at the end of the day the final beneficiaries will be having issues because they will be hurt and their financial fortunes will be impacted. So these are all the things that we needed to discuss. You please note this down according to your mains relevance and also your prelims relevance in your notes. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, the global gender gap report is out, and this is released by the WEF, and here we are seeing a stark decline in India's rank. That is, it has dropped marginally in the rankings, and it is very important for us to discuss this from the perspective of GS1, where we need to use so many data, we need to quote report regarding the status of women in the country as of now. So let us look into that from the mains perspective, and also keeping prelims in mind, that what is firstly the global gender gap index. In the very first place, firstly, we know that it is released and published by the World Economic Forum. It covers more than 140 countries, exactly to be around 148 countries, where the top 5 countries which have consistently outperformed are actually Iceland, which has remained first for 16th years. I mean, for 16 years, Iceland has been at the first position. Apart from that, we have Finland, we have Norway, we have UK and New Zealand, which are the top 5 countries. And what are all these countries actually, judged on? They're actually judged on various dimensions, particularly for the women in their own countries. Firstly, this index will be looking into what and how better are the economic aspirations in those countries regarding economic participation and opportunity, regarding employment, wages and the representation of women at leadership positions in major companies, even at the government sector. Next, they also look at the various educational attainment such as literacy rates, school and college enrollments. They also look at health and survival such as sex ratio at birth, life expectancy, and finally, they also look at very important thing that is known as the political empowerment. And they look at how many women there are in the parliaments of those nations or in the ministerial roles, and that is where they try to calculate it for the women data and calculate and try to compare it with the main data. So they actually try to see if at all the women or men are actually at equal levels or uneven levels. If they are at uneven levels, we do not have parity. That means that we do not have proper gaps between men and women closed. And here, when we talk about the global gender gap or the inequality between the economic opportunities, education, health and political empowerment between men and women, we generally see that there is a 68.8% parity. That means women are 68.8% similar to men in all these areas. That means we still have around 30% way to go, right? And here, time to full parity will be established within 123 years. That means to have equal status in all aspects with men, women need still 123 years. That is actually a very big time. And also, when we talk about women in the global workforce, this attributes to only 41.2%. So this is how. Right now, let us look at India too. Now, India's ranking is 131 out of 148 countries. And if we look at the neighboring countries here, we have the first Bangladesh. That means in the South Asian region, we have first as Bangladesh with rank at 24. According to this report, Bangladesh has jumped around 70 places up towards its rank. That means it was around at 90 something and it has right now reached to 24 globally. And when we talk about after Bangladesh, we have Nepal at 125. We have also Bhutan. Then we have Sri Lanka. Then we have India at 131. And at the last, we have Pakistan, and we all know the reason why. When here, we have to mainly look at India, because here, when we look at economic participation, educational attainment, and health and survival, India has actually improved according to the last report. But with reference to political empowerment, India has reduced its parity. And that is actually, when we talk about the gender gap here, or say the ranking of India, why it has decreased, it is mainly attributed to this reason. And here, it is also noteworthy that we have a 0.3 overall gain in index, but we have to keep in mind due to political empowerment, which has actually pulled us back in the ranking. And obviously, when we look at the data supplied here regarding the labor force participation, this has stayed at the all-time high of around 45.9%, which is kind of high for India. And here, we have also witnessed the female literacy rates and college enrollment rates which has increased. That is also a good signal. And at the end of the day, we also have better sex ratio at birth and healthy life expectancy rates in the country too, which has been increasing for women over a period of time, which is a good signal. And here we have to mainly attribute here the success, the regional success to Bangladesh, which has achieved the rank of 24 as we have seen, because of so many political and economic benefits the government has done for their women. And that is where this brings me to these two PYQs from 2009 and 2019. So firstly, this all the facts related to World Economic Forum we have just covered in the recent analyst discussions. So according to that, let me see how many of you are revising your notes properly. So answer this in the comments, and also let me know the answer to this 2019 question regarding another report of this particular organization. So now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, as we speak right now, the state of Israel has launched severe attacks on Iran's military positions, even having killed their chief of army staff, which is their top ranking military commander. And that is why we have to understand that this particular incident has taken place soon after the IAEA board censures Iran for not complying with nuclear obligations, sparking fears in the region in the Middle East, the sparks and tensions of a war. So that is why, from GS perspective, we need to look into various international organizations. Firstly, let us understand what IAEA is all about, International Atomic Energy Association. So this is actually the global nuclear watchdog. So regarding anything related to nuclear facilities, be it the power plants, be it the technology, be it even the nuclear weapons, the IAEA is the main authority in this particular international matters. So it was established in 1956 and started to work only in 1957. And here the headquarters of the same is at Vienna, Austria. And here the members include 178 countries as of now, including India, China, and even the US. So we can actually understand how serious this organization is, particularly to the nuclear operations of the entire world. And here, when we talk about the structure, we have the General Conference where all the members are present and they actually sit yearly to set policies and budget. Then we have the Board of Governors where 35 countries decide key issues out of the members themselves, and we also have a secretariat to look into the daily operations of the IAEA. Now, when we talk about the key functions here, firstly, they are actually responsible for nuclear safeguards or conducting anti-nuclear weapon checks. They conduct regular inspections, have monitoring standards regarding uranium, plutonium in any countries, if at all they're enriching, as was in the case of Iran previously, also North Korea previously. Then also, according to the various investigations, they submitted a report to the UN too. Apart from this, they also promote peaceful nuclear technology. While they are not against the nuclear technology, they want nuclear technology to be used peacefully for generating energy, maybe by building more nuclear power plants, by giving various supplies of materials and nuclear fuel to the friendly countries, to the countries which are actually capable of doing so. Also, they help in research and development regarding health sector when we talk about using nuclear radiation medicine for treating cancer, also for having better productivity in agriculture, because we can actually use nuclear technology to increase crop yields. And at the end of the day, they are also looking into the emergency response aspects too, because in cases of any nuclear disasters, they help, they assist during the same, as was seen in the Fukushima nuclear disaster which took place after the tsunami struck in Japan. In which year, you let me know in the comments. And also, it looks into the security apparatus because it prevents nuclear terrorism too. Now, what is happening recently is of importance as of now. Now, the UN nuclear watchdog, that is the IAEA, has actually formally found that Iran is not complying with the nuclear obligations at all. That means they are having undeclared nuclear activities, right? They did not explain, Iran did not explain where the uranium traces are coming from according to the various investigation and reports carried out by the IAEA. Also, Iran has high-level nuclear stockpile as reported by the IAEA, and if some statement like this is coming from the IAEA, it is very, very important, because 60% enriched uranium for 9 nuclear bombs has already been refined by the Iranian state, and that can pose a significant regional and later maybe global conflict. And also, IAEA says that Iran is not compliant, Iran is not cooperating with them. And also in the past, according to the joint cooperation a plan of action, which was mainly the pact between Iran and the other countries here to restrict Iran's nuclear ambitions, Iran actually broke away from the deal. And this is where we have to understand that is why it is right now in a very risky position. And also, the US left the deal in 2018, and then Iran also started breaking the rules. So that is why Iran also reacted to this kind of new allegations, and it said that it will be establishing another new enrichment facility to have more nuclear weapons in a secret location, and other measures are also being planned. So Iran, as you can see, publicly is giving such statements, and obviously we all should be concerned, because firstly, anything related to this Middle East and Gulf region affect the oil prices. And as of now, as I'm speaking also right now, we can see the stock market has crashed. Also, the risk of wars have already been rising in the entire region, in the entire world, right? And after this, this attack by Israel on Iran, Iran has also vowed right now to avenge serious actions, because it is the chief of their army staff which has been targeted. And at the end of the day, the nuclear threat is always imminent. So that is why all of the things needed to be discussed, and that is why you let me know the answers of these 2 PYQs definitely in the comments. Now to the next one. Recently, the finance minister actually tried to clarify some of the rumors which has been circulating. So this is the rumor which has pertained to the merchant discount rate. And here, when we talk about the merchant discount rate, imagine a simple thing, that when we go to any general store to buy maybe some groceries, we just take our smartphone and pay the sum of money. Maybe the groceries is amounting to 200 rupees, and you have paid the particular shopkeeper 200 rupees. And here, when we talk about the entire system, how this operates is that you are actually swiping your card or making UPI payments for those 200 rupees, and you are actually, debiting the money from your bank account. Now, the bank is actually trying to settle the payment between your bank account and the merchant's bank account or the shopkeeper's bank account. So this is actually the service which your bank is doing or which any other intermediary is doing for you and also for the merchant. So definitely for anything in life, if you're doing, you expect to be paid, you expect to be compensated. So the banks also expect to be compensated. So this is exactly the merchant discount rate, right? So the merchant discount rate in this case, for example, if you're buying groceries for 100 rupees and the banks will be cutting 1 rupees and will be paying the particular merchant 99 rupees. And this 1 rupees is actually shared between the card issuing company, the payment network such as the MasterCard, Visa or the RuPay, or also the bank which has provided you the machine, the POS machine. So this is actually a fee that shops or businesses pay for accepting digital payments. And also this ranges between 1% to 3% of the transaction value. And here this transaction or say MDR generally exists because we need to actually cover the charges for the banks. And also we have to keep some rules in mind that there is an automatic deduction that the merchant or the customers like us do not have to pay separately. This is automatically adjusted, and also there are no extra charges for the customers. Mainly before 2020, when the MDR was in actually force, the merchants used to receive less payments, right? But as of 2020 and beyond, the government waived the MDR charges on UPI and RuPay payments. And this is why, to actually boost the UPI and the digital transactions in the country. So that is why the Ministry of Finance actually clarified that actually right now there is no such plan by the government to impose or reimpose the MDR, because simply if you can see the UPI performance as of now, they are reaching astronomical levels as of now. So the year-on-year UPI payment growth is 33%, and there are more than 600 million transactions which happen daily to the tune of around 81,000 crores on a daily basis. So that is why the government remains fully committed to UPI payments and digital transactions, and that is why such rumors are totally false. So that is why you solve this 2018 question in the comments. Now on to the last article. Guys, inflation or consumer price index, or the CPI, or the retail inflation popularly known as, has reduced to 6-year low, and right now we are at only 2.8% of CPI. And here, when we talk about the CPI for the very basics of it, we have to understand that it is released by the National Statistics Office, and this is actually under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, where it releases the rural, urban and the combined CPI, where the CPI basket is actually consisted of food and beverages as a majority kind of a say basket. Then we have the various other components such as fuel and light, housing, clothing, pan, tobacco, intoxicants, and also the various services and various miscellaneous goods too. So mainly the CPI is calculating the goods and services inflation at the consumer's level. The WPI is looking at the inflation in goods only at the wholesale level, right? So you can actually understand that the WPI and CPI inflation are quite different, and here we are talking about the retail inflation or the CPI itself. Now here we have to understand that from April 2014, the Reserve Bank of India adopted CPI as the official measure of inflation by the RBI itself to calculate all the monetary policy considerations. And also when we talk about the other kinds of formulas of CPI, we also have the Labour Bureau, which publishes the CPI for industrial workers, which also looks into the dearness allowances for the government employees too. And also when we talk about the AL, or the agricultural labor, and the rural laborers, the base year for the same is actually at 1986 to 87, and this is also looking inflation at their individual levels too. So here when we talk about the inflation, which has right now reduced to 6 years low, it has reduced to 2.8%. It is mainly at the cost of lowering or stabilizing food inflation in the country. So this is actually the main reason. As you can see here, vegetables, pulses, spices, meat, all prices have reduced. And also when we look at the difference between urban and rural inflation is lower, and that is actually feeling more demand due to real wage growth. Real wage growth is actually that wage growth which you get after subtracting inflation from your nominal wage. So that is where we understand that rural inflation is also quite stable. And when we talk about the core inflation, which is the inflation that we actually get after subtracting all the volatile components such as food, fuel and beverages. So that inflation is actually at 4.2%, which is the second highest in 19 months. So definitely we see that inflation has reduced mainly in the volatile items. But in the main items, in the usual items such as electronics and so on, we have 4.2% inflation. And also when we talk about the imported inflation, mainly due to oils and fats, that has increased to 6.3%, and definitely due to lowering inflation, as you can see over a period of time. From August till, from August last year till recently, 2025 May, we are seeing lowering inflation, and that is why to boost demand in the country, the RBI has actually cut down the repo rate. So by cutting the repo rate, we can spend more money, we can have more investment, and later on we can actually have more economic growth. And that is what brings me to this PYQ from 2010. You let me know what is the answer in the comments, and that is where I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please attempt the quiz which is following up. It is for your own convenience, and we will meet again. Till then, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.